On episode 681 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Dr. Sarah Bayliss and discuss her book, Do Nourish: How to Eat for Resilience. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allen, an online health and fitness coach and author of the Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, and welcome to 40 Plus Fitness. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Coach Allen. Um, I'm really excited because as you're listening to this, as I released this today on Tuesday, I'm headed back to Bocas, and it's been about a month and a half, and I really, really miss home. I miss my wife. I miss my dogs. I'm glad to be on a plane today. I don't like getting on planes anymore, but I'm glad to be on this plane. While I'm on that flight, though, I'm going to be working on something called an end of life planner. My wife bought me this as a gift. Cool gift, right? What is she planning? But anyway, she just wants to be prepared if something were to happen to me, make it easier on her to know where things are, have it all in one place. And my mother had one of these, and I have to say it did help me a lot. So I'm going to encourage you to get one. Now, I've created an affiliate link on Amazon. If you go to 40plusfitness.com/prepare, it will take you to Amazon and one of the journals that's in there. They're all very similar. They all ask the same stuff, but this is one that's rated very well in Amazon. And I do get a small commission. It's like 2 to 4%, I forget, but it's $8 book. So I'm not getting rich selling end of life planners for sure. And it's not my end of life planner. I'm not affiliated with them, but I am doing an affiliate link on Amazon, 40plusfitness.com/prepare. I encourage you to get one of these and fill it out. Fill it out completely, because it really does help those that are trying to work on your state, work on your will, everything after. So they know where things are. They can get into your accounts. They can contact the people that need to be contacted and get all of that done, a little easier. I encourage you to do it with pencil. And you should go back and revisit it probably about every 6 months. It's worth putting that on your day timer to just spend a little bit of time looking at it and getting it up to date if anything's changed. The reason I say that is my mother must have done hers years ago because when I started making some phone calls from that book, her financial planner and her accountant had both predeceased her. So it's kind of a weird phone call when you call a place and they're like, I'm asking for someone specific. And we're like, well, he died 3 years ago. Weird way to start a conversation with someone. But at any rate, do update it regularly so they have the most up-to-date information about your accounts, about where things are, about who to call. It really does help. So go out there, 40plusfitness.com/prepare, get a journal and get a pencil and start working on that today. All right. Who's ready to talk to Sarah Bayliss about nutrition and how it can make you more resilient? All right, let's go. Our guest today is a registered nutritional therapist. She runs a private practice specializing in metabolic health, energy management, and stress resilience. She works with clients one-to-one and designs and facilitates group programs and workshops. She started her career in marketing in London. After getting close to a burnout, she became fascinated by the effects of lifestyle on the body, mind, and soul, and then moved out of the city to restart her career in health. Her mission is simple: to help people enhance their health. She is dedicated to making health feel more engaging, fun, and achievable, empowering people to live better and achieve higher quality of life. With no further ado, here is Sarah Bayliss. Sarah, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Now, your book is called Do Nourish: How to Eat for Resilience. And it's one of the few books. I actually ordered a copy of the book. I usually do this electronically, but I did order a copy of the book because I thought I was going to be sitting at a courthouse and they wouldn't let me have electronics there. So I wanted a paper copy of the book so I could sit it because I didn't know how long I'd be sitting at this courthouse because, that's it's courthouse. Um, Anyhow, I bought the book. It's beautiful.
Oh, I mean, that's really amazing to hear. Thank you.
But
Thank you.
even deeper is I think for anyone who's looking to learn about nutrition, you've really made all the concepts very accessible, easy to understand, and all in one book.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, that was my real aim when I was thinking about, okay, so who am I writing this for? And, when coming back to the title of resilience, I was thinking that, essentially, when we get the basics well in our nutrition, um, we can gain that opportunity to gain that resilience. And so the idea of the book was to keep it simple, get the key facts across, make sure people are understanding how to do the basics well, because the basics well are what deliver the results that most of us are looking for.
Yeah. And I think the word resilience was important because up until the point you book, I was like, okay, this makes sense because we go through life and we're getting beat up. We're getting beat up every day by the stress of this, the stress of that, social media, work, family, everything else going on in the world. And the only way we kind of get through that is by being resilient. And nutrition is one of the core ways that we make that happen.
Yeah, yeah, precisely. And I almost think of it like a bit like a bucket or a boat. We have all these things that are going into our bucket that are reducing our resilience, and that bucket can overflow. So it's almost like we need to take things out um, so we can cope with life better, but also we need to fill up our reserves to be able to deal with what life throws at us. And that's the aim of what the book was trying to say, is going, okay, so with all of the demands we have in today's society, what do we need to do to feed the body what it needs so it can respond better to that environment? So it's almost like that analogy of going, right, we need to put things back in to be able to cope with what life throws at us. And that's why I like to call it the idea of resilience, because resilience isn't about this concept of working harder, more hours, putting yourself, under a lot of pressure. It's about being able to cope with what life throws at you and to be able to respond to that in a positive way. And we can only do that well when we have a bucket full of um, elements of life that make us stronger. And one of those inputs is nutrition. And there's other inputs, but one of the biggest inputs is definitely nutrition.
Yeah. You said one thing in the book, and I was like, I'm so glad you said that because I've been saying this for quite some time. Um, Food or nourishment is information.
Yeah.
It's telling our body you're okay, you've got what you need, or it's telling your body you're not okay and you don't have what you need. And I just think that's such a huge statement that a lot of people overlook.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think, you know, we often think about metabolism as this system that just associate it to sort of calories, calories in and calories out, and weight, and how the body looks. And, actually, when I think about nutrition and metabolism, really what it is, it's a system that's assessing our environment all the time. It's looking at the food that's coming in, how much sleep we've had, the amount of, are we moving, how much light we've had, and it's always trying to keep us safe. That's its job. So it's trying to assess the outside world, create an internal response for us to survive within the context that we're living in. And so the inputs from nutrition is building that strength for us to be able to adapt to that outside world. So every time we eat food, or the right food, it sends a right message to the body, builds those cells build those organs, and those organs can function better. Okay, so it's almost like, as you say, it's we either, the food builds our health, or the food can take away our health. And metabolism is just such it's a bigger concept than just the food, but it's understanding that it's really assessing our environment and the inputs that we're giving it, and food is one of those inputs. And when we can create that food that's giving us the nutrients, the body feels safer. Okay, and if the body feels safer, we are less stressed, and we have the ability to think clearly, respond better, function better. And I think, what I was trying to really do as well within the book is get people to think much more intentionally about that. One of the things that all of us do is we eat. We eat 3 times a day. Sometimes we eat more than 3 times a day. And food is an opportunity to build that strength or to take away that strength. And I think if we start to see nutrition as an intentional tool, we can really start to think about, okay, so how do I want to feel today? How am I going to feed my brain so that I can function, so I can think clearly, so I can have the energy to go through the day, and move away from this idea of, food is just fuel, but it's more. It's resilience, it's function, it's life, and to really try and get people to think more intentionally about the choices that they make.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. Now, before we get started, let's
Yeah.
talk about what we're up against. In the book, you identified 8 health challenges, or
Yeah.
basically factors that are challenging our health. Can you go through those 8? Because I think those
Yeah.
are it's really important to know who you're going against before you really start diving into why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think there's probably, more than the 8 I actually put in the book. And the reason I set them out is because I think understanding what we're up against is important when we're thinking about the context of our environment. And I think, therefore, the choices that we make. But I think the first one that I talk about in the book is just the change in, actually, our lifestyles and how we're eating. You know, eating used to be very much a moment where the family come together. You eat together in the evening. It was a place around the table where you're sharing problems, you are connecting, you are uh, building relationships with your family, resolving problems. And I think the habits that we have now around eating is very different. Many people aren't necessarily eating direct meal times. They may not be eating together. They may be snacking or eating on the run. They may be eating in front of a screen. And therefore, even how we eat and sit down and eat is completely different. So before, you'd be sitting at a table, you'd be chewing more, you'd be digesting the food better, you'd have a greater understanding of where the food's come from potentially, you may have cooked it. I think some of those connections are gone because we may be buying food from that's already pre-made, so we don't actually know where it's come, or we're eating on the go, so we're eating in a rush, we're not digesting our food. And there's general practices around eating with the family, eating together is less, and therefore we're losing that connection between what we're eating and how that food makes us feel. So when you're eating on a rush, or you're distracted when you're eating on a screen, or you're working, you don't actually notice the fact that you're eating. And you might come to the end of your meal and go, oh gosh, I don't even remember that I ate that. What did that feel like? And you're like, oh,
What's
that's
this
really
empty
irritating.
plate? What's this empty plate sitting here?
Yeah, and you just realise, go, well, I don't even remember enjoying it, and it's just, you're just fueling yourself, and you're missing the connections between the eyes, the tongue, the digestion, the gut. You're missing all the senses and the pleasures, and also you're potentially missing those hunger cues, those fullness cues. And so the relationship around how we're eating has drastically changed. The relationship with when we're eating has drastically changed. So, I think there's some research that sort of shows us that lots of people are eating maybe 6 to 7 times a day. So we're in this process of we're snacking more, we're not eating proper meals. And that in itself has a direct impact on metabolism and blood sugar and not allowing the gut to rest or to restore or to digest the food properly. So that's one sort of huge area. I think the other area I talk about in the book is the rise of ultra processed foods and the fact that we have processed foods and we have ultra processed foods, and ultra processed foods particularly are foods that have added chemicals and preservatives within them. And they're there for convenience purposes, and they're also there because the supermarkets want to sell more food. They want us to eat more of these foods that are highly palatable, and they have a huge disruption to our metabolic health, our hunger cues. And so people are cooking less and relying potentially on more on these foods. And I think this area of processed food is even becoming more confusing because there is a lot of new foods on the market that are even deeming themselves as healthy.
Yeah.
So you've really got to start thinking about what is in the food you're eating. It's almost you've got to start playing detective in the supermarket now. You've got to go around and look at what's on the back of the label. Do you recognize the ingredients? What are you actually eating? And these foods are changing how the body is functioning, okay? And they're changing how the brain is functioning, which is driving some of the illnesses that we're seeing today. Number 3 in the book, I talk about the decline of food quality. And here I'm really talking about through the Industrial Revolution, we needed to feed more people. It was really important that we were able to do that, but we had this growth of farming techniques and the use of pesticides and herbicides to have more food available. And what that's done is it's affected the quality of our soil, and the quality of our soil has affected the quality of our nutrients that we're actually eating. So we have vegetables that are less nutrient dense than they were in the 50s, and we have fruits and vegetables that are higher in pesticides. Those particular pesticides can affect how our fat cells behave. And so what we're seeing is that we have less nutrient dense food because of farming, and we have a greater need for key nutrients because we're in an environment that is more stressed. We are more stressed. We are sleep deprived. We are potentially eating more sugar. We're on the go all the time, and it's almost like we've become used to living in a state of perpetual stress. Constant emails, busy schedules, little rest time, and that demand on the body means that we need more nutrients, and we don't get that nutrients as much from our food because the soil quality's gone down. So you can start to see that this picture sounds really sad and quite scary. The fact that our demand for nutrients is higher, the quality of the food is lessened, how we're eating means that we're not absorbing potentially all the nutrients we need from the food. And all of this is playing into this bucket of us becoming sort of less resilient within the context of the world we're living in, and the need for more quality nutrients. So it's this idea of it's like we're overfed and undernourished, I think is a really common term to describe that. We have a lot of food available to us, but that food that's available to us hasn't got the core nutrients that the body is seeking and looking for. So the other thing I've talked about, which I actually didn't talk a lot about in the book, but aside from all of those areas, we are just indoors too much. We're not having enough time outside. We don't get enough natural light. Natural light has a really important part in regulating our metabolism and our stress response, and we're at home more, and we're on screens more, exposed to more blue light at night, which is having an impact on our sleep quality and our rest. So it feels like we have a lot of things coming at us that are almost taking away this element of resilience. And we're not really noticing it, and it can start to build up over time. And, one of the ways I describe it is that the rise of, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases, these are modern day diseases and they're not normal. And we almost starting to feel like they are normal. People are accepting these diseases as normal, but they're really not normal. And all of the factors I've mentioned are playing into that. Whether it's the stress, it's the food quality, it's lack of sleep, it's lack of light, not being outside, too much blue light from your screens, all of them are influencing our metabolism. They're all all those environmental inputs are changing how the body is functioning from the inside. So in some ways, we have a greater responsibility in today's society to have more intention around our nutrition because it means so much to us today. And we have to take ourselves almost away from what the supermarkets and the marketeers and the brands are giving us and just pause for a bit and go, okay, what is it I actually need? What does my body seek? How do I feed myself well? And sort of that's really what I try to define in the book. And it comes back to the most simplest concept in some ways, is that nature provides everything that we need. So if we can strip back some of the other things, and eat as close as to what nature provides, we're doing a pretty good job to navigate the new world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I moved away from the United States about 6 years ago, and actually, yeah, just it's been 6 years. And before I left, the common statement I would make is when you go to the grocery store, just stay on the outside of the grocery store because all the
Mm.
box stuff and canned stuff and bottles and jars, they're all in the middle. And I used to say, well, you could just walk along the outside of the grocery store and just shop there. I'm back in the United States for a little while here. And I'm like, okay, that advice no longer stands because the grocery stores, I guess, got smart and they've started putting the processed and ultra processed stuff along the outside too, and it's intermingled. And so you're walking through. I'm like, ah, I was just shocked. I'm like, now I can't just give that simple advice. You literally have to understand this a little bit better so you can make the proper choices. So I want to do that at a high level. Can we talk about, you talked about the 5 pillars of nourishment. And I think that was a
Yes.
real good primer to get someone to understand what our body needs and why this is, well, one, we know why it's important. We got all these health challenges, and most of us are experiencing those at some level or another right now. Um, but the 5 pillars of nutrition, I think, are going to help us understand what our body needs. So could you go through those just quickly?
Yes, the 5 pillars are protein. Shall I talk about each one and explain them a bit more? Do you want me to do them, all of them, and go into it?
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Okay. So the 5 pillars, we've got protein, fibre, and polyphenols, um, quality, healthy fats, quality carbohydrates. Um, have I missed one?
Like I said, yeah, the way you put it in the book was protein, healthy fats, non-starchy
Non-starchy bread.
vegetables, complex
Yeah,
carbohydrates, and
yeah,
polyphenols.
yeah. So essentially, what I try to do in the book is put them in an order of preference to help the person feel at their best quickest. Okay, so when I'm thinking about, function, all of those pillars come from a basic principle of we've got to feed the body the nutrients it needs and cannot make. And when you think about nutrition from that perspective, it makes sense, right? Why feed the body what it doesn't need? Let's prioritize what it absolutely needs, and what does that look like? So when you're thinking about protein, protein is a it's a macronutrient. It's and I don't really see it as a fuel. It's a structure. You know, it builds us. It builds our brain, our nervous system, our skin, our bones, our eyes. It's our repair macronutrient. Um, it builds our immune system. And so we must eat our protein to be able to repair every day, to build the neurotransmitters, to build our immune system. You know, every enzyme in the body that has a role in having some reaction requires a protein. So it's not about a fuel that's feeding energy, it's building our structure, maintaining our structure. And and it's really critical for metabolic health as well, in terms of it helps stabilize hunger, it helps keep us satiated, it slows down digestion. So all the important things in terms of keeping blood sugar balanced. And I think protein is so often overlooked, and many of the clients I see just simply don't get enough of it. And one of the points of the book was about when you start to fill up the body with the nutrients it needs, and you prioritize the right nutrients, then you eat less of the bad things. So I really wanted to get protein in first and get people to understand that. So it's the first sort of element that comes in, and I explain in the book that you can get protein from animal sources, and you can get vegan and plant-based protein. And I explain the difference between what those are and the essential. Essentially, you have essential amino acids. So there is about 9 essential amino acids that the body needs, and those amino acids make up protein structures. And animal proteins contain all the essential amino acids, and plant proteins don't. So I talk about how to match those together and how to get the appropriate amounts. But the idea is that we fill up on our protein, we get that on our plate, and we eat it 3 times a day. And the pillars of nourishment are essentially something we should try to be getting in every single meal that we're eating. So then I go on to talk about healthy fats, you know, and particularly I pay attention a lot to omega-3 fatty acids, which are our essential fatty acids. Again, they're essential fatty acids the body cannot make. So we must eat them. And they have a really important role on brain health, on how our neurotransmitters work, how they function, our structure of our brain. They also have a really important role in our immune system. And we can see in research that when we get enough omega-3 fatty acids, we can protect ourselves from things like Alzheimer's. There is also links between greater cognition when you're eating your omega-3s. And I also talk about other fats that drive benefits. So we're thinking about olive oil and avocado, or avocados, nuts and seeds. All of those can have potential benefits to the cardiovascular system when you're talking about another type of polyunsaturated fatty acids. And a lot of people have a fear of fat, so I try and share with them what's the role of fat, how can you choose it, and how much should you choose. And so we start off with protein, we build in some healthy fats, and then we need to get a lot of good quality fibre into us. And the fibre is essentially coming from non-starchy vegetables. Non-starchy vegetables are those vegetables that have the highest fibre content, and they also happen to have a lot of micronutrients, and the micronutrients that the mitochondria need to function. And the mitochondria are these little batteries in our cells that make those cells function and work, and they need micronutrients. And the fibre plays an important role on digestion. So in terms of balancing our blood sugar, making sure that the energy from our digestion goes into our bloodstream slowly, so we've got that long, slow supply of energy. And the second part is that the fibre has a really important role on the gut and the microbiome, and the microbiome has an important role on our systemic health. And there are 2 particular bacteria in the gut that have shown to have a good association with longevity, health, and keeping immunity at bay, and that's Akkermansia and Bifidobacterium. And those bacteria feed on the fibre, and we need to feed them for those gut bacteria to look after us. Um, and, that's a really very high level, simple explanation, and we can go into much more detail about the role of the gut. But essentially, the role of the gut, it is almost a organ that protects us from the outside world, and it requires us to look after it. And when we look after it, it looks after us. So it has a really important role in both our brain health, but also our immune system, and also actually our metabolic health. So how well we process our carbohydrates in our foods. And a part of the gut piece is polyphenols, and polyphenols are potent plant compounds that have systemic benefits. And again, it's the gut bacteria that metabolize these, and it's the gut bacteria that use these polyphenols to create anti-inflammatory molecules that are then sent around our body. And the way to look at polyphenols is like colour. The more colours we eat, the more variety of colour in our fruit and vegetables, plus our spices, the more polyphenols we're getting. And again, those polyphenols help feed that gut bacteria, and they have that systemic effect around the brain and metabolism. And the last part I talk about is complex carbohydrates, and I talk a little bit about carbohydrates because when we think about carbohydrates, they break down into glucose molecules, a single glucose molecule, and glucose is an incredibly important energy source. However, it's the source. The body can make glucose, so in some ways, it's the least important macronutrient. Okay, it's not essential. Proteins have amino acids which are essential. We must eat them. Fats, we have omega-3 fatty acids which are essential. We must eat them, and therefore I wanted to show the reader that they need to start thinking about building their plate with these areas that are absolutely essential. And the last part of that is complex carbs. We do need to eat them, and they are very personal. So what somebody needs to eat is dependent on potentially their lifestyle, their life stage, how much exercise they're doing. But in the book, I very much break out the fact that we need to be eating versions that are complex. So that means they have the fibre within them, and when we eat them, they break down into the glucose molecules slower because of the amount of fibre they provide. And most of these, again, are coming from nature. So we're thinking about sweet potatoes, butternut squash, potentially things like quinoa, brown rice. All of those are more complex carbohydrates. And the reason I put them last is because what I often see is in my clinic and in supermarkets is they're often the food that we overeat. And it's the least important macronutrient. Although it's essential, we need carbohydrates, we need the glucose. But absolutely, we must get the proteins in, we must get the fats in, we must get the fibre in first. And then we can match that glucose according to all those carbohydrates according to our demand. And so in the book, I give some examples of how you can find your right balance, what that does look like on a plate, but really thinking about getting the protein, the fats, and the fibre in, along with the polyphenols, as your priority, and thinking about those complex carbs as almost the last area of your plate.
Yeah. If you go to a restaurant in the United States and you order, say, a steak and a potato, often the potato will weigh almost a whole kilogram. It's it's huge. It's
Yeah,
like almost over 2 pounds. This huge potato. Even if you get a smaller steak because you're trying to eat less, you get this huge potato, and of course they're going to bring the rolls out first. So you're already hitting the starches before you get started. So
yeah.
completely backwards to the way that we want to set our plate if we're going to eat for resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I notice when I speak to clients is they say to me, "Oh, so there's actually a food hierarchy." I'm like, "Yeah, well, there is really." And once they get that idea that there's a food hierarchy, they sort of go, well, actually, I can do this. I understand how to adjust my plate. It's a very, very simple message.
Yeah.
What I try and explain in the book is the science behind each of these macronutrients and micronutrients is complex, but the order and how we eat it is actually quite simple. And I try and share that through. But you're right. Society is throwing carbohydrates at us. The restaurants are giving us everything in the wrong order. We are more hungry, we have greater cravings, we buy more of those things, so we can end up in this vicious cycle. And when we start to rebalance things, you can actually notice quite a profound difference and in quite a quick period of time.
Now, there are a couple things you said in the book that when I first talk to my clients and I say you should probably do this, let's try to do this. I get the most pushback on these two things. And the first one I want to talk about is you talk about keeping a food diary.
Yes. Nobody likes a food diary. They absolutely hate it. Um, and it's so interesting. Every time I work with a client, I get a food diary. I need one. I ask for one. Okay. And even when I'm working with a client, halfway through working with them, I ask them to do another food diary. And they're always pretty resistant to it.
Yeah.
And I think a part of it is it just feels like a lot to write everything down that you're eating, and it feels like a bit of a pain, but it is incredibly insightful. Okay. And I just had a client today. She emailed me and goes, oh my gosh, just my food diary has opened up a whole load of questions from writing everything down. Food, how we eat and our behavior around food can be almost autopilot led. We do things without thinking about it. And I think when you start to write down a food diary, you bring more attention to your behaviors, which is great.
Yeah.
How often you're eating, what you're eating, when you're eating, what time you're eating, and you get a greater insight into the balance of your plate. And the most perfect thing about that is when you then look back at what you're eating, what you have eaten, and then you go, okay, how are we going to change that? Okay, you can find real simple ways and solutions. So there's resistance to do the food diary, but once you've done it, you can make really small tweaks in the context of what a client's already eating to get a greater behavior change result. And I think that's what I try and always explain to my clients. This is not about me judging you. This is not about you feeling bad about what you're eating. This is information for both of us, and it helps me to help you to make better changes. And when you start to say it like that, they are
Yeah.
okay, I get it. I'll do it, I'll do it. But
Yeah. Well,
can be,
I take it down to the if you don't know the gap, because people say I eat healthy. I don't know how many people have come on as a client and said I eat healthy. I'm like, okay, let's just do a food diary. I don't want you to change anything. Eat the way you eat and write it down. Or I'll make it easier sometimes. I just take pictures. Just take
yeah,
pictures. And I had one client. She's like, I eat healthy. And I'm like, okay. I said, just take pictures. And she said, oh. And I said, what? She said, when do you want me to start? I said, well, right now. So your next meal, I want pictures. She said, oh, well, we were going to go to Taco Bell tonight. And and so it's just that, yeah, I eat healthy, but I'm going to go to, I don't know anything healthy at Taco Bell, to be honest. I haven't been in a Taco Bell in probably 25 years. So maybe they do have something healthy there, but
I don't know. I wouldn't know.
but it's just one of those things of we will make a blanket statement, and until we sit down and actually start writing it out, we don't recognize. Like I say, I told a client, I'm like, okay, we're going to do a sugar. Just was years ago. I said, let's do a sugar challenge, and she says, okay, well, what? I said, so the targets are 100. If you don't monitor your sugar at all right now, just we'll start at 100 grams. And they thought, well,
Mm,
that's a lot. And I said, well, you might think so, but when you start actually trying to eat that, you might realize how much sugar you're actually eating when you start looking at the sugar, just the sugar. And then I said, so there's 100 and there's 50. You choose your level. And this woman went out there and she started tracking for that first day, and she said, I'm going to do 100 because she was realizing she was eating over 200 grams of sugar.
yeah.
It was just in her food, and she didn't even know that it was there until she started doing the tracking. So it's a huge valuable tool to do this and include journaling how you felt when you were eating, how you felt after you ate, things like that. It's just a huge tool, but it gets so much resistance from people to do it when we first get started. But they learn so much, and it's a valuable tool.
Yeah,
Now,
it's incredible, I think.
now the second thing that you encourage us to do that again I get huge pushback is to take time to cook.
Yes. I say this is really interesting, isn't it? And one of the ways I say this is every time you put your plate in the hands of somebody else, you are taking away your health to some degrees, or you're putting your health in the hands of somebody else. So, when you think of it like that, you're thinking, okay, so if someone else is making my food for me, or someone else is putting that food on that plate, you're giving them control of your body. Do you want to do that? And so I I try and explain it like that. And then the second thing I always try and say is that you, we have to take time to cook, but it doesn't have to be a lot of time, right? It can be 15, 20 minutes, okay? And actually, you can cook really, really, quickly in that period of time. And then you have control of your plate. Then you have control of your health. And it's really as simple as that. Um, and the way I get around it, and I think I talk a little bit about this in the book, is think about cooking as an activity of joy. What can you do within that time to bring some pleasure to that moment? Most people say they haven't got time to cook, right? Or they don't have time. And I think the way I like to look at it is say, well, time isn't necessarily the problem. The problem is what you choose to do with your time. And most people are really busy and they're stressed. They haven't got time to do things that they like. Well, why don't we make cooking a part of that? Cook, put some music on, light some candles, create an environment that you enjoy. You enjoy spending time in. You could have a FaceTime with a friend, put them on loudspeaker, listen to a podcast. Use the time that brings pleasure to make that food. And when we make time to cook, then we can have a greater relationship with the food we're eating. So we can recognize where it's come from. Um, and we also have a greater sense of pleasure when we sit down and eat it because we've made it, right? We've put our effort into it and we sit down and we enjoy it and we have more presence with it. And I think the idea of cooking also encourages that idea of eating more mindfully, eating properly, chewing properly, digesting your food well. All the things that we don't do when we buy pre-made food or we eat on the go or we're eating in a rush. So I think it brings about a greater relationship with how you eat, a greater relationship for where that food comes from, and also just that idea of every time you make your food, you're taking back control of your health. You're not letting somebody take that away from you. And I think that's a really, really powerful message.
Yeah, I was doing a chili cook off one time, and my concept for my chili was that everything in the chili was whole food. I made my own chili powder. I
Wow.
tomatoes, beef. You know the and one of the reasons I lost was I put beans in the chili, which the judges didn't like. But I was watching the guy next to me in the booth next to me make his, and he was putting cup and cup and cup of sugar into his chili. So there was so much sugar in his chili, and I was like, okay, he's probably going to win fan favorite because we've
Yeah.
been conditioned to that. And so restaurants, even restaurants, everybody else, their standard is to add more sugar than you would ever imagine was in it. Because I mean, who would think a whole bunch of sugar in a chili? But that's exactly what he did, and he
Yeah.
won. He did. He won fan favorite. I know mine was the healthiest chili out there, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah. And
he got fan favorite.
it's so interesting, isn't it? It's a bit like every time you go to a supermarket, every time you go to restaurants, they want you to buy more of their things. How are they going to do that? Well, let's add more chili, let's add more sugar,
Sugar.
sorry, add more preservatives, more flavorings, more fat, more salt, because then you enjoy it more, you're going to buy more of it.
Yeah. And one of the things I'll encourage my clients to do because I get it. You get off work, you end up working late at work and you don't get home till 6:30 and you're exhausted And the last thing you want to do is spend time cooking a big meal or cooking meal. And so it's easier to call the services, Grubhub or whatever's available in your
Mm.
area, Uber Eats, and do that. But again, you don't know how that's made. I encourage people to do batch cooking, and if you really want to do it right, invite a friend over.
Nice.
Sit
Yeah.
down and sit down. The two of you just have a glass of wine, talk, and cook food together.
Yeah.
They
Lovely.
bring some ingredients, you bring some ingredients, and you cook meals. They take away. Some of it goes in the fridge, some of it goes in the freezer. And you've got those quick meals for the nights when the kids have soccer, and you've got this and that and the other thing, and you don't have time to really sit down and cook a meal because it could take 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. Here you have something you can easily warm up and then you're ready to roll. Um, and it really it doesn't take as much time. You're cooking 4 or 5 meals all at the same time. It actually can go very quickly, and you're spending time with family or with friends. You know,
Yeah.
there's opportunities there.
Yeah. I love that, and it reminds me of a lot of one of the things I always say to my clients is cook once to eat twice at the
Yeah,
very, very bare minimum, and that's generally how I operate my nutrition. I cook once to eat twice, and even that can take care of the meal the next day,
yeah.
um, if possible. Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I really like about the book is you didn't just sit there and say, "Okay, go do it. Just go do it all. Just get it all done right now." Okay, start. You actually set up like a 6 week implementation process to go through and get each of these elements set up and working for you. Can you kind of just talk about the process a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of that has really come out of that 6 weeks. Very much come out of the idea of how I generally work with clients on a one-to-one basis and where I've seen the greatest success. Now, we know that when you try and change too many things at once, you're going to stick to it for maybe a week or maybe 2 weeks. You're going to put all or nothing into it. You're going to drain your motivation. You're going to get at the end of the 2 weeks and you're going to be shattered because all you've been doing is trying to implement too many things at once. And we know that doesn't work. We know that health. I always think about health and nutrition is about practice. Every day is an opportunity to practice something. Practice doing well. Okay, so the reason I broke it down into 6 weeks is because I wanted to implement one thing at a time. And I wanted people to understand as we were working through the book what that pillar of nourishment really meant, what those foods within that pillar mean, and how to get that person eating, get the reader to eat in a way that suits them. And the organization of the pillars is very much defined based on trying to fill you up and feel satisfied and motivate you to continue on that journey, which is why I really started with protein. Because and if you're changing what you're eating, rather than changing everything at once, as I said, rather than getting rid of a load of things, just change one thing. And I start off with going, let's just get that protein right. Don't worry about anything else, just get the protein right. And just spend 1 week getting that right. And this is what it can look like in breakfast, this is what it can look like in lunch, and this is what it looks like in dinner. And practice it. And if you don't get it right, practice again the next day. And stay on that one pillar until you feel confident. And then you can move to the next pillar. And I've laid it out because you can do it in 6 weeks. But for some people, it may take longer.
Yeah.
They may feel like they can't quite get their protein right. They can't quite do the shopping to get it in right, or they're just not making enough, or they're still struggling with choosing the right sources. Well, then you stay on that week. But the idea is that if it takes you 6 weeks, every week you're starting to adjust an area of your plate. And by the end of those 6 weeks, what you've got is a balanced meal. And the way it's laid out is for anybody can follow this guide, no matter if you're a vegan, you're a vegetarian, you're a meat eater, you can follow this guide and eat in a way that suits you. What you often get and which doesn't work is well, in my experience, is when you start to change everything and too much, people just get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And in this way, you're not changing what they're already cooking potentially. You're not changing what they might already be eating as a family, but you might be changing the amount of that one thing they're eating or the type of that one thing. So they can start to integrate change in the context of how they're currently living. So it's not a complete upheaval. It's more about a slight adjustment. And at the end of the 6 weeks, hopefully you might have adjusted everything. But if you haven't, you've made half of the adjustments. Well, then you just carry on to get, you double it 12 weeks or however long it takes you. But the idea is one pillar a week, and at the end of the weeks, you've got this, the end of the 6 weeks, you've got this sort of perfect nutrition plan for you that you can live by for life, ideally.
Yeah. It definitely makes it easier to accept and work through so that it's not just this all or none, all now, get it done, you know,
Yeah.
pass or
And
fail.
that exactly, and it's exactly how I've seen my own clinic work successfully. And even to break it down further, if people struggle with it, I just say to them, okay, let's just do pillar one and just breakfast. Maybe you just do that for a week. And then you do pillar one and lunch. And then you do pillar one, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so you can elongate it
Yeah,
to get to a point where you feel like you're making progress at the pace that you're comfortable with.
definitely makes sense. Sarah, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are three strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Just three.
Just three.
Just three. So, I like to build things on the basis of like bookmarking your day. So, how do you start your day well, right? So, if we can start our day well and end our day well, hopefully in the middle will just be fine, right? And so, if I can think of those three strategies under that. So, the first thing I would say is get up in the morning, get outside, and get your breakfast right. If I can have those three as one, or is that
That's
three?
fine. That's, yeah, I'll let you roll.
So like, get your mornings right, and for me it's light and breakfast. If you get light through your eyes, you see the natural light, you set your circadian rhythm, that sets off the right signals so that you every cell and organ is functioning at its best or knows what it should do by when, and then you ground and you eat that right breakfast. You fasted overnight, you've just woken up, you need to fuel your body. You fuel your body with the right food in that morning, and then it's going to take you through till lunch. It's going to give the energy you need. And so that's where I would say is one. So light and breakfast, and then if you're going to bookmark the day, end well, right? Eat your dinner. Um, Make sure you wind down well to sleep well at night. And a part of that winding down is making sure you're getting darkness, no time on screens, get into bed, make sure the room is dark, and get your proper rest. And I think if we can bookmark our days, then the middle can, in some ways, almost work itself out. That's
Excellent. Good.
my
All right. So, Sarah, if someone wanted to learn more about you, more about your book, Do Nourish, or anything else that you're doing, where would you like for me to send them?
So you can send them to my website, which is Sarah Bayliss nutrition.co.uk. I am also on LinkedIn, where I post and I have a newsletter. And I'm also on Instagram, which is Sarah Bayliss _nutrition. Okay. And
Excellent.
you can find all my resources there, access to the book, and I write a newsletter every 2 weeks, giving just top tips and advice around inspiring healthy living, essentially.
Great. I'll be sure to have those links in the show notes for this episode. Sarah,
Thank you.
thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate your time, and I hope this has had some value to your audience.
It absolutely has. Thank you. If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Ben Carpenter and discuss his book, Fat Loss Habits, the no BS guide to losing weight. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.